I was driving alone at night. The kind of night where the darkness seemed to swallow everything around you. The headlights cut through the blackness, but beyond that, it felt like I was in a void. I had taken this route hundreds of times before, but tonight, it felt different. The road was deserted, and the radio had lost its signal miles back. The silence was oppressive, and I found myself glancing at my mirrors more often than usual. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle seemed to feel like it was right next to me. The clock on the dashboard showed it was just past 11 p.m. I was tired and eager to get home. The narrow, winding roads through the forest always felt airy at this time, but tonight it felt downright sinister. As I rounded a particularly sharp bend, my headlights caught a glimpse of something in the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing. There, in the middle of the road, was a figure. A woman dressed in a long, white dress, her hair hanging down in front of her face. She didn't move, didn't react to the bright lights shining directly at her. I rolled down my window and called out, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't respond. She just stood there, still as a statue. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something wasn't right. I knew I should just drive around her and keep going, but something compelled me to get out and check if she was all right. I stepped out of the car, walking towards her slowly. "Miss, are you all right?" I asked again. She still didn't move. As I got closer, I could see her dress was dirty, torn in places, and her bare feet caked with mud. I reached out a hand to touch her shoulder, and that's when she finally moved. She lifted her head, and I saw her face. Her eyes were empty, hollow sockets staring right back at me. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and I stumbled back, horrified. I turned and ran back to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. I glanced back, and she was gone, just vanished into thin air. I jumped back into the car, locked the doors, and took off down the road. My heart was pounding and my mind was racing. I didn't know what I'd just seen, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I kept looking at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see her standing there in the road behind me. But there was nothing. I drove faster than I should, my eyes darting from the road to the mirrors and back again. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound seemed amplified. I could feel my pulse in my throat, and my hands were slick with sweat on my steering wheel. When I finally saw the lights of my town in the distance, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I pulled into my driveway, still shaking. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to calm down. That night was quiet, and my house looked so inviting, so normal. I went inside and locked the door behind me, double-checking it for good measure. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind replaying that night's events over and over. I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't sleep at all that night, and even now, I avoid that road at night. I don't know what I saw, and I don't want to find out. It was a dark, stormy night. I know it sounds cliché, but it really was. Rain pelted my windshield like pebbles, and the wipers struggled to keep up. I was driving home from a late night shift at the diner, exhausted and eager to crawl into bed. The road was empty, just me and the endless darkness. As I turned onto a deserted stretch of highway, my headlights caught a figure on the side of the road. A man, soaked to the bone, was standing with his thumb out. I usually never pick up hitchhikers, but something about him seemed desperate. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe I just felt sorry for him. I slowed down and pulled over. He jogged to the car, water streaming off his coat and dripping onto my seat as he climbed in. He said thanks and told me that he'd been out there for hours. I told him it was no problem. He said it was just a few miles up the road, while steering straight ahead. His eyes were intense, almost unsettling, but I shrugged it off. It was late and I was tired. We drove in silence for a while. The only sound was the rain and the hum of the engine. I glanced at him occasionally, noting his worn clothes and deep lines on his face. He looked like he'd been through hell. Then out of nowhere, he asked me, "Do I believe in ghosts?" The question took me by surprise. I said, I guess not. Why do you ask?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I've seen one," he said finally. "Years ago, right on this stretch of highway." A chill ran down my spine. I asked him what happened. He sighed deeply. "I was driving home just like you and picked up a hitchhiker. She was a young woman, looked like she'd been in an accident. She didn't say much, she just asked for a ride. I took her to the address she gave me. When we got there, she thanked me and got out." "Seems pretty normal," I said, though my heart was pounding. "It was," he agreed, until I got home and found her scarf on my seat. I went back to return it. The house she went into was abandoned. It had been for years. We lapsed into silence again. My grip tightened on the wheel, and I glanced at the clock. Just a few more miles. Finally, he spoke again. "You can let me out here." I slowed to a stop. He opened the door and stepped out, turning to look at me one last time. "Be careful out there," he said, then disappeared into the night. I watched him go, then pulled back onto the road. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My blood ran cold. In the back seat, there was a wet, crumpled scarf. Driving long distances at night always unnerved me, but it was a necessity for my job. That night was no different. I'd been on the road for hours. The highway was in pure darkness, illuminated only by my headlights. The radio was my sole companion, crackling with static and the occasional snippet of a song. It was around midnight when I noticed the headlights behind me. At first they were distant, just a pair of dim lights on the horizon. But then they grew closer, brightening the inside of my car with their glare. I figured it was just another late-night driver, maybe a trucker trying to make up time. The truck rolled up behind me, his massive grille filling my rearview mirror. I felt a rush of annoyance as it tailgated me, practically pushing me down the road. I sped up, hoping to put some distance between us, but the truck matched my speed, its headlights almost blinding. The truck showed no sign of letting up. It followed me, relentless and aggressive, as if it was trying to run me off the road. I tried to shake it by switching lanes, but the truck swerved with me, its tires screeching on the wet road. I was terrified as I pressed the gas pedal harder, the speedometer inching higher. Just when I thought I couldn't go any faster, the truck's headlights suddenly disappeared. I blinked, confused. One moment it was there, bearing down on me, and the next it was gone, as if it's never been there before. I slowed down, my breath coming in short gasps. Maybe I'd imagined it, a trick of the lights or fatigue playing on my mind. But the fear was real, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. A few miles down the road, I saw the truck again. It was parked on the shoulder, its engine idling, but there was no driver in sight. I passed it slowly, my eyes scanning the cab for any sign of life. It was empty. I drove on, my nerves frayed. The road seemed endless, each mile stretching out longer than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that the truck was still following me, lurking just out of sight. Eventually, I reached a small town and pulled into a gas station. My legs weak as I got out of the car. The man inside gave me a curious look as I stumbled to the counter. "Are you okay, buddy?" he asked. I nodded, though I didn't feel okay. There was a truck, it was following me, and then it disappeared. The man's expressions turned serious. "You seen it too, huh?" "What do you mean?" He said, "Folks around here talk about a phantom truck. It chases drivers on the highway, then vanishes. Some say it's a ghost, others think it's something else, but everyone agrees on one thing: it's dangerous. I left the gas station in a daze, my mind racing. As I got back into the car, I couldn't help but look back down the highway. The road was empty, but I knew better. Somewhere out there, the phantom truck was waiting, ready to haunt the next unsuspecting traveler. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other horror stories on the screen now. And until next time, sleep tight.